and welcome to Abstract Essay, where ideas take shape, thoughts find depth, and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He is the author of the book Land Without Continent, none other than Mr. Matt Savino.
Hi.
Welcome, Mr. Matt. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
My name is Matt Savino. In I've kind of done a lot of different things in my life, but being a computer programmer has been the primary job, I guess. And in 2018, I took a road trip from Los Angeles to Panama, and then during COVID, I wrote a travel memoir about it, and that's what this book is.
Mr. Matt Savino, thank you so much for sharing your travel memoir to the world and hoping for more and more travel memoir to come. And tell us the title meaning Land Without Continent is a profound title. Geographically, the region is a part of North America, but culturally, it's often feel distinct. What did the phrase come to mean to you as it traveled, and how does it reflect that unique identity of this part of the world?
Well, yeah, that's interesting that you say that because if you were born in the United States, it's part of North America. A lot of other countries in the world, it's part of North America. But if you actually live in Central America, you think you're part of a single continent called the Americas, which stretches from Canada to Argentina and Chile. And I think that's because, and also if you're born in France or Italy or Greece or Portugal or Spain, you also think that there's one continent called the Americas. And that's because I think these Latin speaking countries don't want to break up Latin America by putting part of it in North America and part of it in Central America, South America. And it's interesting because even if you live in the United States, if I ask people what continent is Costa Rica in, the answer I get more often than not is either South America or Central America. So, and if you ask them, they're if you ask them like who's somebody from North America is always somebody from Canada or the United States. It's never somebody from say Mexico. And even like the Olympic this and it really only became two continents after World War II. Which is why the Olympic flag has five circles on it. It's Oceania, Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Americas. It's all one continent. And so that's kind of the title is it's to me Central America especially just feels like this untethered landmass where they don't even think they're in the continent that most of the world thinks them in, and they don't really feel attached to anything. And if you ask most people, even in the United States, what continent it's in, you get divergent answers. So that's kind of to me of a multi-country landmass. I would say that area feels like one of the most untethered in the world, and that's the meaning of the title basically.
The meaning of the title for sure. The catalyst for the trip. What was the personal uh inspiring for your journey? What
So
inspired you for your journey?
the catalyst was fairly practical. There there was this going to be this photo expedition in Patagonia, and we had I was there when our guide arranged. So we were. It was. I was there one year, and the plan was to come back the next year, and you get to go in these fjords in southern Chile, where hardly anybody gets to go. You have to have special permission of the government. But he had met this boat captain who could get that permission, and it was just cool watching them meet, and it just felt like the closest I could ever come in my life to some kind of real expedition. So I said I was in, but the other thing that I knew from being down there is when you're going in Patagonia, you're driving back and forth between Argentina and Chile a lot. And the only rental cars that will let you do that are these horrible little tiny cars that they're akin to, I would call them the Geo Metro in the US, which they don't make anymore, but they were just terrible little cars that had no amenities whatsoever. I thought for sure we were going to die in one of those cars. We almost rolled our car. It had these horrible little tires that always pop. And I just started thinking, could I get my own car down there? And could I drive down there? And so I Googled, can you drive to South America? And I have a Toyota FJ Cruiser with nice big wide wheelbase. It's got airbags all over the place. So just in case we do roll the car, we probably won't die. Um, and and it turns out you can, and lots of people do it. And it's called the Pan American Highway. It stretches from the Arctic Ocean to Ushuaia, Argentina, the southernmost city in the world. Except for there's one break called the Darien Gap in between Panama and Colombia, which separates North and South America from our point, again, from Americans' point of view. Um, and but so you have to ship your car around that, which is kind of a pain. You have to find like a partner, and then rent one shipping container on a cargo ship, basically, and you got to go through all this rigmarole. But you can do it, and lots of people do it. So that was it. Once I saw that, I started googling it and reading about it and reading blogs of people who had done it, and I got excited about it and decided I was going to try to do it.
Yes, definitely. What was one preconceived notion or stereotype you had about this region that was completely dismantled by the reality of your journey?
Yeah, by far the biggest one would be that some of these Central American countries and Mexico parts are just these crime-ridden hellholes. That's in America. That's kind of in the United States anyway. Sorry, and also when I say America, people in Costa Rica consider themselves Americans as much as we do. So, but trying to say United Statesian doesn't work all that well. But I tell a story about in the on the border between El Salvador and Honduras, which is two of the scariest countries before the trip for me because I knew they had lots of gang problems and just the stories you see on the news. Somehow I dropped a $5 bill out of my wallet, and this guy came running up to me with it. And at the beginning of the trip, I would have been really surprised by something like that. $5 is a lot of money in El Salvador. But by that point in the trip, I would have been surprised if it didn't happen because people are just so warm and genuine. And of course, 99.99% of them would give you the shirt off their backs. And it's just this, but they have these gang problems, a lot of which are exacerbated from the US. These criminals that kind of got hardened in US jails learned from American gangsters and then got deported and dumped back in their home countries where they spoke Spanglish. They didn't fit in with the local gangs who really weren't that violent at that point. They would just do a lot of little petty things. So they just kind of dominate. Eventually, there's so many of them, they dominated the local gangs and brought this hardcore violence that they learned in U.S. prisons. And a lot of their problems stem from that. But I would get down there and it was always a little scary the first time in a new country. And I think it's just a human reaction thing. You get used to something in a country and then you feel like you're home. Okay, I got El Salvador figured out, but Honduras, that's going to be scary. And so when I first got to El Salvador, I had to get a SIM card for my phone, and I asked the kid behind the counter, is there anything, do I have anything to worry about? Is it dangerous down here? He's like, no, the gangs won't mess with tourists. They just want to sell you drugs. They don't want to mess with you. But just don't hit on a drug dealer's girlfriend or gangbanger's girlfriend, and don't try to deal drugs on their territory. And I heard that more than once. So, it's a sad fact of life that for a lot of people down there, it's not that safe. But if you're a tourist, they usually don't want to mess with you because that'll actually bring down a lot of heat and it's so by the end of the trip, I felt kind of silly about all the fear that I had about all these different areas. Not that bad things can't happen, but you almost have to get pretty unlucky just to get caught in a crossfire, really. They're not usually targeting you. And that can happen in the US. I have two friends. I know two people well who've gotten hit by stray bullets in the United States and are dead. And it's absolutely heartbreaking and it's destroyed, families and extended families. So it can definitely happen anywhere. So that was the biggest preconception for sure.
The biggest for sure on the experience and the road. A road trip has its own unique tempo. What was the rhythm for your days?
The reason for what?
Rhythm.
Oh, the rhythm.
Was
I got
yeah.
you. Rhythm. Let's see. Sometimes it would be driving multiple days in a row, but usually I would try to park myself somewhere for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. I got into a nice rhythm in Antigua, Guatemala, which was one of my favorite cities on the whole trip. It's where I actually, because I had a friend visit and then another friends were coming about 3 weeks later. So I ended up staying there over a month and I kind of got into a routine where I felt like I lived there. But the road trip rhythm is a lot of driving and definitely a lot of kicking myself for sitting around in the hotel room in the air conditioning and farting around till like 11 o'clock and then not getting on the road. Um, I beat myself up a lot for that. There's this hotel chain called City Express in Mexico, and they have a 1 p.m. checkout time. And I remember the first time I saw that, I'm like, oh, that's ridiculous. Nobody's going to stick around until 1 p.m. But then you just, lay there, start browsing the internet, and just get lazy. And it ended up being like I talk about it in the book, like this. I basically had to admit I had a problem, and I was really glad that there was no City Expresses outside of Mexico. It's better when it's an 11 a.m. checkout time. At least then, about 10, you got to get showered because you're expecting somebody to knock on the door or whatever. But yeah, beware that 1 p.m. checkout time, I guess. Hold on, I'm
Or
going to block the sun here.
yeah, no worries.
This time of day, I get little sun splashes on my face.
So, Mr. Matt, tell us about your vehicle. Was it merely a tool or did it become a character in the story?
It absolutely became a character in the story. It's a Toyota FJ Cruiser. It's a pretty good 4 wheel drive vehicle. Like that, they have a rivalry with Jeeps, and for a while, kind of with Hummer, but Hummer I think doesn't really make that kind of vehicle anymore. Um, and it was never produced in Mexico or never sold in Mexico or Central America. You could get it, but you had to import it. So it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. So my original some people when I was reading about the trip, they would try to blend in, but I was like, well, I'm a big redheaded gringo in this silver car that looks like a marshmallow that nobody ever that was never sold in this part of the world. So I'm never going to blend in. So I kind of went the other way. I said, I'm going to get stickers for each country. I'm going to put them all over my car. And I'm going to try to look like I'm on some kind of expedition, like, oh, you wouldn't want to mess with that guy. You might get on the news or something. And I call it in the book the brightly colored poison frog defense, except that I'm not actually poisonous because I didn't have legions of fans and I'm not on an expedition. So it's actually they have those frogs that aren't really poisonous, but they look like the frog that is poisonous, and they use his reputation. So that's what I compared it to. But yeah, a couple times I ripped the bumper off accidentally on a tree, and I was really worried that this was going to set the whole trip back, and I had to meet people, and I wound up going to these Mexican mechanics who have the reputation for being like the best in the world, and they got right on it like two little busy beavers, and in about an hour had the whole thing fixed. And I'm like, okay, and we never even talked price, and it ended up costing $25. And at the end, um, he patted the hood and he said, "Good truck." And I was like, "Yeah, good truck. Like, thank you for not for you know not breaking from my stupidity for ripping the backing up in a lot and ripping the bumper off."
Mr. Matt, traveling through multiple countries by road is a logistical feat. What was the most significant, well, mechanical or simply confusing obstacle you faced at the border or the road or on the road?
Um, let's see. Well, as far as the road, the number one rule of overlanding, which is what these people call themselves, although in the U.S. overlanding, if you're overlanding domestically in the U.S., that tends to mean like I'm going four wheeling and I got fancy 4 wheel camping gear and all this stuff. International overlanding means doing what I did, basically, where you're just driving around through these different countries in your own vehicle. And the number one rule is don't drive at night. And when you first hear that, you think it's because of like banditos, but it's really mostly just because of potholes and there's dogs and cows in the road and all kind. If you're not local, you don't know all the hazards. Um, so that was a big one. And then I learned pretty quick early on not to get myself too tired because there's always something going on. It's not, you can't just zone out like you can on the U.S. highways, and Mexican drivers are really good because you're not just paying attention to what's on your side of the road. You got to watch what's going on the other side because you're expected to get over as far as you can to allow people to pass and do other things. As far as the borders go, that's definitely the biggest pain in the butt of the whole trip. Um, there's always a choice of you can get a helper, which usually is about $10, and they'll run around for you and do all kinds of stuff. But then you hear horror stories of people's helpers like taking their documents and not giving them back and scamming them and trying to get $50 or $100. But that never happened to me. And the first couple borders I went to were so sleepy, I didn't even need anything. But then Guatemala, there was a kid that was like 15 years old, and I was like, all right, I'll support the youth here, and he was really helpful because he can go wait in line for the car stuff while I'm waiting in line for the people stuff. So it kind of turns you into two people. But the crazy part was the guy gives him so the one guy gives him my car title, and then he's supposed to take it off to another place, my actual car title, like. And the whole thing is you're not supposed to give people your original documents, but you have to carry your real car title with you to do all this stuff. And the guy just hands it straight to the kid, and the kid runs off. And it's like, okay, well, I just gotta assume that this guy knows this kid, and that no, they wouldn't be doing this. And yeah, it was fine. The kid came back. Um, but those are the interesting parts. The Nicaragua border was by far the craziest. It was just so bureaucratic. There were so many stamps and things, and the helper there absolutely earned his money. He was the best, and that was also the only time on the trip that someone in authority tried to like ask me for a bribe, which I'd spent hours and hours worrying about before the trip, and how am I going to react? Because you're not supposed to just give in. That's bad because that's bad for the
Yes.
person coming after you. So you're supposed to be really friendly and be like, oh yeah, we can go down to the station, no problem. Just write me up a ticket, and then they'll get frustrated and leave you alone. But the only time was that one guy. They were all outside because their air conditioning failed. So he's like, his shirt's unbuttoned down to his waist, and he asked for a propina for a tip, and I just was smiling. I was like, no, I'm already giving a tip to my helper guy. I can't give two tips. That's crazy. And he pouted. He made this comical pout like that. And I just, of all the different scenarios I ran through in my head, and there were a lot of them, I never considered pouting as, as what the reaction that I would get when I turned down a bribe. But then he just, he pouted for like 5 seconds and then stamped my form anyway. So all is well that ends well. But yeah, the borders, they're such a pain. Because I want to go back and
Indeed.
do South America. And my biggest decision is, do I drive back all the way to Panama like I originally did? I mean, that was the original plan, and then put my car in a shipping container, or do I ship it straight from the United States to Colombia? And I'm leaning towards the second one just because of the border crossings, just because I don't want to go through all those again. And sometimes too, you get really unlucky, and they can hold you there for days if they're just in a bad mood and feel like it.
So, Mr. Matt, before we continue our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please to listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my Abstract Essay is already in fifth season, Abstract Poetry in second season, and Book 101 Review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my Food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season. I'm a baby podcast. Law 101 and Mental Health 101. Love Letters in third season, and Movie 101 Review and Music 101 in fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Mr. Matt, what is the most difficult part of reintegrating into your normal life after such a transformative and immersive experience?
Yeah. Well, the expense shock It's actually pretty cheap to do what I did. And you think, oh, it's a trip of my life. I'm driving through all these countries. It's going to be expensive, but it's probably cost less than a third of what it cost me just to exist in Los Angeles. So, and that really gave me that opened my eyes of like, okay, I guess if worse comes to worse, I could just live on Social Security. When I get older, live on Social Security and move to Honduras or something. The other one too is just if so I own a little condo here and I rented it out, and if I didn't own that condo, I might not have come back, or I might have gone somewhere else. Like
Mhm.
just having 7 months away, I didn't even feel connected really to where I live anymore. But I came back because I owned the condo, and then after a little while, I started to get back in the rhythm and felt connected again. But yeah, the lesson is if I do this again, I might not want to come back because I'm thinking about selling it this time before I go do South America. So just to be totally untethered. Um,
For someone listening who dreams of similar journey, what is the one piece of practical philosophical advice you would give them?
just do it, and do it when you're young if you can, because I'm the crazy person that's doing this in my prime earning years. But if you can do it in your 20s, you might feel broke, but it's really not that expensive. I don't encourage everyone to try to do it in their car like I did because I don't think that's totally environmentally sound, and it's more of a pain. It's a lot easier to just do it as a backpacker, and if you want to rent a car in certain areas so you can go explore like rural parts, you can do it without having to hassle with getting dragging your car across borders and all that stuff. But yeah, the advice is like you're only young once, and you can. It's way cheaper than you think. Um, it's not something you have to save up for and do it at the end of your productive life or whatever. You can do it when you're young, and you'll have a much broader understanding of the world. As you come back and go into work, or maybe you end up deciding I want to live internationally, and you find some way to do that. And I know people that do that, which is really cool. They've almost never been, they're from the United States, but I don't think they've lived much of their adult life at all in the United States. Which, if I had it to do over again, I would think about doing something like that. Pretty interesting.
Yes, for sure. So, if you had to capture the entire essence of your book in a single mental photograph, one image or what image from the trip that is take it all, and what would that image be?
Well, it's weird because I don't know if this is like exactly what you're looking for, but if once one thing pops into my head, I can't get anything else in my head. On the last week of the trip, I was in Panama, and I stayed at this Airbnb, and they had a larger than life size portrait, or photograph of print of a photograph right inside the door, and it was this little indigenous girl who's probably 2 to 3 years old, in this fancy white dress, like there was some kind of special occasion, but the background was these ramshackle houses that look like they've been built, one step at a time for generations or something. And the whole every time I would come back, so I would take Spanish classes. This is where I was kind of waiting for my car transport. I would take my Spanish classes. I would come back, and there's this little girl looking at me, and it just felt like she was saying, why are you here? I mean, the other part is she had this look on her face,
Mm.
like, I don't, like when little kids aren't quite sure if they know who you are or where you're coming from, and they're sort of hesitant. So it was a really interesting picture because I'm sure her mom was off camera going, smile. And she's actually going, who's this weird photographer dude with it? What the hell is that? But it really resonated with me, like, okay, what was the purpose of this trip? Was it just a joyride? And I tried to make the book, and I kind of do my best really to argue for a more sane immigration policy than what we're doing right now. Of And that's the only time I get political in the whole book because I feel really passionate about that. But I wanted it to have a bigger purpose. I wanted to be able to tell that little girl, hey, there was a purpose to this. It maybe it opened a few people's eyes in the United States about what life is really like down there, and these people down there living with dignity, and it's not like what you think. you know And we need to have empathy for these people, especially because the U.S. has caused a lot of the systemic problems that their countries have. Um, so that's the image that has stuck with me from the trip, is that little girl kind of being like, why are you in my country? What are you doing here? Are you just passing through? Are you, and so I tried to do right by that little girl, hopefully, and have some kind of
Well,
higher purpose to the book.
well, Mr. Matt Savino, thank you so much for sharing your land with that continent to the world. So
Thank
can
you
you
for the
please,
applause.
yes, can you please invite our listeners to support your land with that continent? Where do people can buy your book, Mr.
You can buy it on all the usual places, Amazon, bookshop.org if you want to support local bookstores. You can also go to my website, which is just my name, mattsavino.com, and it'll have links to all the different things and also my blog from the trip and photography and stuff like that. And it's a good place to start.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Matt Savino because if you support him for sure, more and more empowering land without continent to come. So, Mr. Matt, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.